we have often found that it is not helpful to name them, to detail them, to identify them specifically. So let me just say that we have continuing, long-standing concerns with Iran's treatment of American citizens in Iran. That is why an agreement, again, announced back in January that prevented Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, that reached a financial settlement to save the American people potentially billions of dollars, and secure the release of 5 Americans that had been unjustly detained in Iran, was hailed as such a positive, beneficial outcome for the United States. But let me be clear, the United States does not pay ransoms. The only person that's making that accusation, at least included in the Wall Street Journal story that we're talking about, is some Iranian official.
No, it's actually Paul Ryan's doing it now.
They are now. So it sounds to me like they are once again in a position where they're making the same argument as hardliners in Iran in an effort to undermine the Iran nuclear agreement. The president made clear a year ago that right-wingers in the United States were making common cause with right-wingers in the Iranian government. And again, if they're doing it again to try to justify their opposition to an agreement that has benefited the American people, they can do that, but I think that's going to be pretty hard for them to explain. Maybe there's another letter from Senator Cotton to the Supreme Leader we don't know about.
Can you confirm or deny that the money arrived the day the Americans left?
I can't confirm the details of the specific transaction.
You can't say anything about the remaining balance of this hundreds of millions of dollars that the United States has agreed to pay to settle the tribunal issue.
What I can't provide a specific update for you in terms of the transaction. I can tell you when the United States makes a commitment, we're good for our word and we live up to the terms of the agreement that we signed on to. Okay? Margaret.
Josh, I think a lot of us reported on the transfer at the time, the $400 million from the Iranian account, the $1.3 from taxpayers coming from the Treasury. But in terms of the logistics of this, there are some in Congress, including Ed Royce, who's written and exchanged letters from the State Department asking for more granularity on that.
Avowed opponent of the Iran deal, continuing to try to justify his opposition to this agreement.
As you would say, these are actually 3 separate deals. This isn't about the nuclear accord. This isn't about the prisoners you're arguing. This is its own deal. So if we put those 2 aside and we just focus on this deal, specifically with the money transfer, will you be providing that detail to Congress, knowing that you can't tell us from the podium, as you just said?
Well, again, we'll continue to engage with members of Congress about this. I think what is true, and I think would certainly account for the descriptions that were included in the newspaper today, is that the United States does not have a banking relationship with Iran. And the reason for that is because of this administration's commitment to ensuring that we continue to hold Iran accountable for a variety of activities that we are deeply concerned about.
So that's logical in terms of not refuting the idea that it had to be a cash payment since there weren't any banking accounts, and that now that the banking system's a little less clogged, you could find other ways to pay, so maybe the timing suggests once again it's around the same time. Do you understand that? I'm sure you appreciate that without the clarity on this, the innuendo and the optics make it tough. So to truly kill that idea and the allegations being made of a ransom payment. So again, why not provide that detail of exactly how the money was received?
Right. I actually don't think that there's a lot of rationality in the argument that you've outlined that is being made by hard right-wing officials in Iran and Republican critics of the deal.
Don't need to know how the $1.3 billion of their money was given.
Well, no. I'm talking about as it relates to this suggestion that somehow this was a ransom payment, that this is somehow connected to other elements of the deal. The only people who are making that suggestion are right-wingers in Iran who don't like the deal and Republicans in the United States that don't like the deal.
It's very easy for you to kill that argument by saying this is exactly how it happened and why, not just trust us, there's nothing shady about a plane arriving in the middle of the night loaded with cash, which is, you're saying it's innuendo, right? You're saying there's nothing that was done that was not above board.
I think, Margaret, I guess the point that I'm trying to make, Margaret, is we could not possibly have been more transparent about this arrangement than to have the President of the United States announce it to all of you on live national television on the day that the agreement was reached.
The the agreement was reached and the intent to pay the 1.7 billion, yes. But the details, you're saying yourself, it's new detail in an old story.
Yeah.
I guess clarifying the detail is what would help.
But why is that relevant? Why is that relevant? Particularly when we all know that there's no banking relationship between the United States and Iran. So again,
Cash transfer.
yeah, I understand. Again, I understand the political attacks that are being made by people who are trying to justify their opposition to our engagement with
At
Iran.
minimum, the 1.3 billion is taxpayer money. So don't people have a right to have an answer to that question?
Again, that's why we announced it, as you point out, back in January.
But the details of that.
So,
Just be like,
and what are
it was
the
transferred
details?
from the trust fund to this bank, or
So
it
we'll-
had to be in euros and francs because we don't
Yeah.
have a banking relationship,
Yeah.
because it's complicated. Like,
Right.
that would be a really simple thing that people would be able to follow.
Yeah, so look, I guess none of what you have walked through changes the basic facts here. We acknowledged, again, back on January 17th, that there would be all kinds of innuendo hurled by people who oppose engagement with Iran. Republicans in the United States who oppose engagement with Iran. I recognize that the details that you're seeking to elicit might make for a colorful news story, but they don't change the facts. They don't actually change any sort of innuendo that's going to be lobbed by critics of the deal about our intent. They certainly are not going to effectively convince, again, a right-winger in Iran who's seeking some kind of propaganda victory in the pages of the Wall Street Journal from basically making a false claim that this somehow is a ransom payment. What I can tell you is that the United States, when we make an agreement, we live up to it. We announced the terms of this agreement back in January. The reason we announced the terms of the agreement, in part, is because we have a desire to be transparent with the American people. We also have a desire to advocate for the fact that because of this smart agreement, the American people potentially saved billions of dollars.
So you see this as completely politically motivated.
Again, the facts of this case, the facts of this situation, and the benefits of this situation have been known for more than 6 months now. You all have been reporting on it for more than 6 months ago. Again, not because of some secret anonymous leak in the bowels of some government bureaucracy, but because the United States of America announced it on live television from the White House.
I know, we've all been covering it, but the
Yeah.
thing that's new is the detail that you're saying is irrelevant. And that's why it becomes
Well,
such a sticking point
I
with the
recognize it's my job to
Congress.
answer the questions up here, but I will acknowledge, I don't understand, other than for the fact that it makes for a colorful lead. I'll concede that. But it doesn't change the facts of the situation. It doesn't change anybody's assessment about the motive of the United States. Whether or not this was wired from one particular U.S. government account to some Iranian government account, as opposed to delivered on pallets, that's not going to change the argument of Paul Ryan and Marco Rubio that they're opposed to the deal. It's not going to change the propaganda efforts of the, again, they're opposed because they are.
You're saying you're not linked.
Because they are. I'm saying the argument that they're making that is false, that has been proven wrong time and time again, is not going to change based on, whether this was wired or delivered in paper currency. So so I understand the interest in details for a more colorful story, but I don't understand what this does to the broader outlines of an argument that have been in place for 6 months now. Republicans have lost that argument. Critics of the deal have lost this argument because we have succeeded in preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. We did succeed in securing the release of 5 Americans who are unjustly detained overseas in Iran, and we did succeed in saving the American taxpayers potentially billions of dollars by reaching a long-standing financial settlement with the Iranians over their money.
So you're just arguing that it's all worth it, basically. That
It's all. I think, again,
the details don't matter on this, is what you're saying.
yeah, I've not been quoted saying that, and I wouldn't be quoted saying that. I think what I'm saying is, it doesn't change the contours of the argument. The argument that is being made by Republicans is they're struggling to justify their opposition to our engagement with Iran. They've lumped it all together. We've made clear time and time again that we capitalize on this opening with Iran to try to settle this variety of claims. And there is no disputing, despite the best efforts of right-wingers in Iran and right-wingers in the United States, that we have prevented Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. They have rolled back key aspects of their program. We did secure the release of 5 Americans. And we have settled a longstanding financial claim in a way that benefits the American people, potentially saving billions of dollars.
And lastly, there's nothing like this will happen to secure the release of the 4 Americans or U.S. residents who some of their families have said are being held in Iran, and the Iranians have said they're being held. I know you can't talk to their
Right.
specific cases.
Well, what I will say is that the United States, under President Obama, has not paid a ransom to secure the release of Americans unjustly detained in Iran, and we're not going to pay a ransom. If there are Americans who are unjustly detained in Iran, we will make a case regularly through some now established channels with Iran to advocate for their release. Okay? Scott?
This financial dispute you mentioned has been going on for 35 years. Why was it necessary to airlift in the pallets of cash on the very weekend of the American prisoners released?
Again, Scott, the reason is simple. The United States does not have a banking relationship with Iran.
That explains that it was cash, but doesn't explain the timing.
Because we reached the agreement and Iran wanted their money back. So again,
They waited 35 years.
right. So you might expect that they would be eager for them to get their money back. Again, this all stems from a payment that Iran had made into a U.S. account related to a military sale that didn't actually go through. The military equipment wasn't provided. So, again, you can understand why they are quite eager for the money. You also would understand that they're quite eager for the money when you consider that the value of their currency is plummeted, that they haven't been able to invest in infrastructure, that they've got debts that need to be paid, and that they're in the middle of a recession. So at the time, they were eager to try to address the legitimate concerns of the Iranian people about the state of the Iranian economy.
Why was the U.S. government so eager to pay it?
I'm sorry?
Why was the U.S. eager to deliver the money so quickly?
Well, again, I would not describe the United States as eager. I describe the Iranians as eager. I think what the United States is we're a country that lives up to the commitments that we make. And that's exactly what we did. Okay. Michelle.
So it's been called a ransom payment by Iran. That's not exactly surprising. But would those prisoners have been released had this payment not been made at the time that it would? So isn't it essentially a ransom payment then, even if the U.S. does not view it that way?
No, it is not a ransom payment. The United States does not view it that way, and it's not accurate to describe it that way.
So would those prisoners have been released then if this money hadn't been paid then?
Well, again, I think what is true is that there were a team of negotiators. Let me just start from the beginning. What I know is true is there were a team of negotiators in the United States that were interacting with Iranian officials to secure the release of 5 Americans who were unjustly detained in Iran. That negotiating work was successful, and those Americans are at home. There was a separate group of negotiators who are working through the Hague process for decades to try to reach an agreement, a settlement on these financial claims. And there is momentum in our relationship where we're closing out accounts, where we were resolving longstanding concerns. And in each case, the United States reached agreements and closed out accounts in a way that benefited the American people. And whether that is preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, or rolling back key aspects of their nuclear program, or securing the release of 5 American citizens who are unjustly detained there, or reaching an agreement on a long-standing financial claim made by the Iranians about Iranian money in a way that saved the United States taxpayers potentially billions of dollars. There are a lot of benefits to this deal. And we talked about them back in January with a lot of transparency. You all reported on it. And again, the motive of people who want to talk about it again seems to be to just drum up innuendo in an effort to cover up the benefits of all of these agreements.
Well, I think a lot more people find this interesting than just people who are opposed to it.
Yeah.
But again, would those prisoners have been released then if this money had not been paid then?
What I can tell you is that our negotiators who were talking with the Iranians about what was necessary to secure the release of American citizens in Iran succeeded. That was different than the group of negotiators who were involved in The Hague negotiating with their Iranian counterparts to settle these longstanding financial claims.
So because U.S. policy is opposed to ransom payments, even if it were only for the appearance of this not being a ransom payment, why would you not have made Iran wait even a week longer? I mean, why would Iran's eagerness to get their hands on their money be more important than making sure that this was not a quid pro quo that was based on, the exact timing being right?
Well, I think the answer to that is pretty obvious, which is that even a week delay would not have prevented Paul Ryan and Marco Rubio from falsely claiming that they're a ransom. Because, Michelle, come on, I saw you sigh. If we announced this financial settlement on the same day that the prisoners were released, that's fodder to our Republican critics. I get that.
But everything's fodder.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
No one's questioning that. It's an election coming up.
That's fine.
It works both ways.
Well, I don't think it works both ways.
But it was a pretty simple question. Would those
Well,
prisoners
let me just say one
have
other thing
been
about this.
released if the money wasn't paid on that same weekend?
Well, again, I guess what I'm saying is it's a pretty simple negotiation that took place, which is you had a group of negotiators who were interacting with their Iranian counterparts to secure the release of 5 American citizens. There's a different group of negotiators who were involved in trying to reach this settlement at The Hague. I think at some point the premise of your question is predicated on a decision that was made by Iranian officials. So I guess I would wish you the best of luck in trying to get an answer from them about what decision that they would have made. Let me tell you one other thing, though, as it relates to sort of waiting a week. It certainly wouldn't have prevented Paul Ryan and Marco Rubio from falsely accusing us of paying a ransom. But here's the other key thing. It also would not have prevented right-wingers in Iran from falsely seeking a propaganda victory by making the same argument. So that's why, again, to go back to Margaret's line of questioning.
I've already said none of that's any surprise.
Okay, none of it's a surprise, but it also is a good illustration, I think, of how the outlines of this argument haven't changed in 6 months. So there may be some more details that make for good newspaper copy, but they don't change the facts of the situation, and they don't change the rationale for the argument that we have been making about the variety of ways in which the American people have benefited from this series of agreements.
There's no harm in putting second eyes on something when some new detail has put it back in the public view. I mean, nobody's questioning that anything really has changed. It's just,
Well,
why not ask again? There's no harm in that. Anyway, just quickly.
I haven't stood up here and said that you guys shouldn't be asking the questions that you are. I welcome the opportunity to talk about all of the ways in which the American people have benefited from our interactions with Iran. I think what I do take some umbrage at is the suggestion that somehow this is new evidence that proves that a ransom was paid. That's false. It was false when that accusation was made in January. It is false when that accusation is made in August. And it is false when that accusation is made in light of facts that don't change the calculation, either on the part of the president or anybody else who has a view on this matter.
How helpful would you say Iran has been in determining where Robert Levinson is?
Yeah. Well, again, I don't have an update for you in terms of the conversations that we've had with the Iranians about that. What we have indicated as a part of that agreement that secured the release of 5 Americans who were unjustly detained in Iran is Iran made a specific commitment to cooperate with our efforts and to share information with the United States that could potentially lead to the rescue of Mr. Levinson. But I'm not able to speak to the status of those ongoing talks. Okay? Kevin.
Thanks, Josh. Despite sharpening my axe for a while to dive into that topic, everybody else has pretty much touched on it, so
Okay.
I'll switch gears a little bit and talk Russia. You guys did a great job, by the way. Thank God, right? The president mentioned a tough relationship, obviously, with Russia. The winsome appearance of payment goes out, people who are held captive come home. Maybe it was just timing, granted, but would you at least acknowledge that it doesn't look great?
Kevin, if that was a legitimate concern, it is a concern that would have been raised 6 months ago when we originally announced it. That's why I'm quite skeptical the integrity of the reaction that we've seen from people who have long been on the record of opposing our efforts to engage with Iran. And the fact is, despite their opposition and despite their criticism, we have succeeded in rolling back key aspects of Iran's nuclear program, in preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, in securing the release of 5 Americans who are unjustly detained in Iran, and settling a long-standing financial dispute in a way that potentially saves American taxpayers billions of dollars.
They keep plucking Iranian Americans. Do we have any of their citizens?
Well, I'm not quite sure what you mean by saying have any of their citizens. There are any number of Iranian Americans in the United States.
I meant specifically, their government seems to be kidnapping Americans, kidnapping Iranian Americans over there. Are we doing anything in response to that?
Well, I can't speak to any individual case for the reasons that I outlined earlier. What is true is that when there were Americans who we believed were unjustly detained in Iran, Secretary Kerry acknowledged when he was having daily meetings with his Iranian counterpart in the context of the negotiations to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, he raised U.S. concerns about that unjust detention every single day. So this is the status of Americans held against their will around the world is a top priority of the U.S. government, and there are significant efforts and significant resources that are committed to seeking the recovery of Americans who are unjustly held or held hostage around the world. Okay. Byron.
Thanks, Josh. If I can circle back to Iran briefly, is it your contention that it is not a ransom payment because there was no quid pro quo, or because it was Iranian money that was flown?
It is our contention that there was no ransom paid to secure the release of U.S. citizens who are being unjustly detained in Iran, because A, it's against the policy of the U.S. government to pay ransoms, and that's something that we told the Iranians that we would not do. We would not, we have not, we will not pay a ransom to secure the release of U.S. citizens. That's a fact. That is our policy and is one that we have assiduously followed.
But you said the timing, you refused to describe this as a coincidence also. Regardless of whether this was a ransom, was the timing a concession to allow the Iranian regime to save face or to gain a symbolic propaganda victory? Was that something that factored into the U.S. calculation?
We talked about this calculation back in January. And what we said back in January, I stood at this podium on January 19th and we talked about this. The timing is predicated on the ability to resolve a variety of concerns that we have with Iran. Iran was signing off on deals. And we got them to sign off on a deal that released 5 Americans who were unjustly detained in Iran. We got them to sign off on a deal that rolled back key aspects of their nuclear program and prevents them from obtaining a nuclear weapon. We got them to sign off on a deal that would resolve long-standing financial concerns, or long-standing financial dispute. That, yes, that returned $400 million of Iranian money, but that also saved U.S. taxpayers potentially billions in interest charges. So all that came to a head at the same time because we were focused on capitalizing on this opportunity to complete these agreements. And the benefits of those agreements are quite difficult to argue with. I recognize it doesn't prevent our critics from trying to do so in a partisan political way, but when it comes to our national security and when it comes to preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, when it comes to the safety of American citizens abroad, when it comes to saving taxpayers billions of dollars, those are the kinds of things that should rise above politics.
Switching topics, the president said in March at the South by Southwest festival about voter